So are you struggling to outline your first novel? Do you find the content out there that just doesn't give you enough visual cues or make this process really make sense? If you are, you're not alone. In this video, we're going to cover the tools that I use and the resources that I've combed through to create an evergreen visual template that will help plot out each part of your book. Okay, so my name is Hannah, and this is That Creative, a space where we talk about living a creative life and whatever that means to you. I'm on this journey of getting my first piece of writing published. And I'm working with an industry editor alongside a published author who's connected me, and they have worked with some of the large publishing houses. So I'm documenting this process to help others that might have some of these same questions. So some of these questions that I'm going to answer in this video are, what are some resources to start with? The next is like, what are the first steps, right? There's so many things out there. How do I outline and know that I'm hitting the right points? So let's start from the beginning. What resources are my top resources that helped me finally get the hang of this, right? So I've heard so many things since I've started this process and about pacing, story structure, 3-act structure, writing with script writing in mind, and so on. And I've got very overwhelmed with with the amount of information that's out there. But as a visual person, I felt extra confused and overwhelmed because there wasn't this resource out there that fully made sense to me and that I could see. I'm going to touch on what I wish I would have known when I started this whole process. So number one, I would read Story Genius by Lisa Cron. So I've read this 3 times now. I have the audio version and I have the hard copy version as well. In that, it's really helped me understand character and this idea of a third rail. So I'll get back into that next. The second thing that I would read would be Save the Cat. And specifically, there's a couple books out there. But I'm writing a book, a YA novel. So I have Save the Cat Writes a Young Adult novel by Jessica Brody. That would be the next book that I read. And that really has a breakdown of story for you. And then within each act, it basically gives you an outline of what is needing to happen in each section of it. So it's fantastic. So those would be the first 2 things that I do. After I have those 2 things down, I would go and pick up whatever book, whatever genre that you're in. I'm sure you probably already have those as well, have some as well. But for me, I went to YA. I went into YA and I read a YA novel, and then I analyzed at what points that these specific things happened in that book. And it helped me realize that there was a lot of patterns that mimicked what was happening and that was mimicked in the story structure. So it allowed me to then, when I got into outlining, I had a different story that I was able to reference that I could look on that and say, okay, what was being done at this story? And then within my own story, how can I make sure that I have a similar kind of arc? So having another reference was really helpful for me. So those were the first 3. So I took all of that information that I learned and tried to put it into a Google document. That didn't work. I then tried to put it into Scrivener into the little blocks. That didn't work either. And finally, I landed in my favorite tool that I actually use for my day job as a designer, and I made it my own template in Miro. So let's get into that. So what was my first step once I got into Miro? I went through those resources. I now have a better understanding of what I need to understand for my story. And so what was my first step in Miro? For me, I ended up listing out all of my characters. So I made character cards, as you can see here, and I started giving them all of their backstories. I gave them their misbeliefs, the town that they came from, all of this information that can really help aid into a fully well-rounded character. But then next, I have what are their descriptions? So is a character free thinking? Are they really self-assured? And then how does that show up for them in their actions? How does it show up for them in their mannerisms? And And so that really helped me understand how they were going to show up based off of their history. And then next, I envisioned how that character interacts with my main hero, right? So, and then what does this main character learn from the supporting character? So by really mapping a lot of that stuff out, I was able to have a full grasp of not only the supporting characters themselves, every character actually. I was able to have a better understanding of the characters themselves, but then also how they interact with each other and then what they learn from each other. So that was the first thing I did. And this will allow me then, to really reference this material when I have dialogue, and make sure that I know to a T what I can expect from this character. We just talked about resources, what my first steps were. Now let's put it together and answer, how do I outline and know that I'm hitting all the right points? So this was my biggest question too, and I don't want you to be scared by it. So let's dive back into Miro and I'll show you the color-coded madness that I've created for this process. So let's think back to that whole structure, breaking apart the 3-act structure into all of those little pieces that was kind of talked about in both Story Genius and in Save the Cat. So I first utilized those outlines from those resources and I made it into a more concrete timeline. I needed to see it horizontally in that timeline and then broken out into the 3, as you can see. Step 1 is I did a really rough pass. So I added stickies quickly for this rough pass, and I answered the questions that each section is supposed to touch on. And so once I had now that I have a solid rough draft with these stickies, I'm cleaning it up. So I'm moving the stickies down into the note section, and then I'm cleaning it up, and I've created this table, which is going to end up being chapter by chapter outline with bullet points of what's happening in each scene, which characters, as you can see, I have a little column for characters. So I'm going to add little stickies for when that character shows up. And I don't even have to think about what's happening and why that character's there, because I know exactly how they're interacting with my main character. So it helps me realize that I know now, having the way that I've set this up is helping me immensely. It shows which characters show up in that scene, and then this is now allowing me to really call out the poignant areas and meaning or poignant things that I know that I want to call upon in these scenes. Like, what do I want readers to take away from each section? What do I want the main character to take away from with each of these sections to make sure that every single area is really making an impact and driving that third rail, as Lisa Cron talks about in Story Genius. So there you have it. That's my Miro outline, where I'll be tracking changes to my structure. I'll be weaving in a lot of the subplot until I'm happy with the core internal structure before heading back into my writing tool, which, like I said, I'm using Scrivener to finish my manuscript. So I have not felt this comfortable with this whole process in such a long time. So I hope if any of this is helpful, please let me know down below. I know the next question is probably, so how do you know that this is the right way to do it? And the answer is I don't, but I do know that this is a process and tools that have immensely helped me really unlock the clarity that I personally needed as a visual creative to see the information in a way that made sense to me. So, and to get this information finally mapped out in a way that's going to help me really make sure that I have a solid novel and a solid manuscript. So, and to really set myself up for success. So to me, it's a win. But I'll be following up with this process, and I'll give feedback on how this is seen by my editor in the next episode of the Road to Publishing and PRs series. And so if you haven't seen this last episode, I'll link it here. So until next time, thank you for joining. Follow along if you're interested in this journey, and let me know if you want access to the Miro tool that I created. Comment down below Miro, and I'll see to getting it made into a community board. So with that, I'm gonna get back to writing, and I'll see you next time.